The night was dark, heavy clouds blotting out the moon, and the rain fell in relentless sheets, soaking the empty streets of Atlanta. Sarah Mitchell clutched her 7-year-old daughter, Grace, close to her chest as they ran through the puddles, her heart hammering in her ears. She didn't know who was following them, only that every step they took felt like a step closer to danger. Fear had a weight she couldn't shake, pressing down on her shoulders, threatening to suffocate her. Then, out of nowhere, a sleek black car screeched to a stop beside them. A man in a dark suit stepped out, his face partially shadowed under the brim of his hat, his eyes cold and unreadable. "Get in the car," he ordered, his voice calm but commanding. Sarah froze, unsure if this stranger was salvation or another nightmare. But there was no time to hesitate. Something deep inside told her that the stranger wasn't like the others she'd encountered in her desperate life. Before I continue, if you believe in kindness and second chances, hit like, share this story, leave a comment, and don't forget to subscribe for more heart-touching stories that restore faith in humanity. Sarah hesitated, glancing down at Grace, whose small hand trembled in hers. She could see the fear reflected in her daughter's wide, innocent eyes. Yet, there was also a flicker of trust, the kind children give when they sense a protector even before knowing why. With a shaky breath, Sarah lifted Grace into her arms and slid into the back seat, the stranger following closely behind. The interior of the car was immaculate, leather seats glistening in the dim light of the dashboard. He didn't speak, only drove, and with each mile, Sarah's anxiety built. She wanted answers, yet she knew that asking too many questions could be dangerous. Her life had been a storm of uncertainty for months, and now, suddenly, she was thrown into the eye of something far larger than herself. Her mind drifted back to how they had ended up here. Life had been a relentless struggle ever since she left her abusive ex-husband. She had worked double shifts at the diner, barely making rent, and every night she had tucked Grace into their tiny apartment, promising her that things would get better, that one day safety and happiness would find them. But that night, as she walked home from the diner, she had sensed shadows trailing them, whispers of threats from someone she had unknowingly crossed. Panic had driven her into the rain-soaked streets, and then came the stranger, Alexander Reed, though she didn't know his name yet. A man who looked like he belonged in a boardroom rather than rescuing women in the middle of a storm. Alexander Reed, the silent CEO of one of the nation's fastest-growing tech companies, had spent his life building walls. Money, power, and influence had shielded him from the vulnerability of human connection, until that night. He had been driving home from a late meeting when he noticed the woman and child on the deserted street. Something about them stirred a memory he had long buried. The fear in Grace's eyes reminded him of his niece, taken years ago by someone who had evaded justice. He had followed them discreetly, careful not to startle Sarah, and when he saw the urgency in her movements, he knew he had to act. Years of business strategy and calm, calculated decisions suddenly seemed trivial compared to the immediate need to protect this woman and her child. The car sped through the empty streets, the rain blurring the city lights into streaks of gold and red. Sarah finally broke her silence, her voice trembling, asking who he was and why he was helping them. Alexander's gaze remained fixed on the road, his voice steady. "You don't need to understand everything right now. You just need to know that you're safe with me." Something in the simplicity of that statement cracked through Sarah's skepticism. She wanted to ask more, but the urgency in his demeanor silenced her. Grace, sensing the tension but trusting the stranger instinctively, snuggled closer, her tiny arms wrapped around her mother's neck. Sarah felt a strange, cautious hope looming, a feeling she hadn't allowed herself in years. They drove for what felt like hours until Alexander pulled into a secluded property on the outskirts of the city. It was a spacious house, far removed from the urban chaos, surrounded by thick trees and the quiet hum of nature. Inside, the warmth of the home contrasted starkly with the cold, stormy streets they had just escaped. Alexander handed Sarah a blanket and offered Grace a warm cup of milk. Sarah's mind raced. Who was this man, and why was he risking so much to help them? She wanted to ask every question, but something in the way Alexander moved, with precise calmness and quiet authority, convinced her that patience was safer than curiosity. For the first time in a long time, Sarah felt a measure of security, and with that security came tears she hadn't realized she had been holding back. Over the next few days, Alexander revealed little about himself, but his actions spoke volumes. He ensured Sarah and Grace had food, clothing, and most importantly, a safe place to rest. The fear that had gripped Sarah for months began to loosen its hold. In the quiet moments, she watched Alexander work silently, coordinating security, making calls, and planning what he referred to only as the necessary precautions. His presence was commanding, yet there was a tenderness reserved exclusively for Grace. He helped her with schoolwork, played with her in the garden, and for the first time, Sarah witnessed her daughter laugh freely, a sound that lifted a weight from her own heart. Sarah couldn't help but feel a mix of gratitude and guilt. She didn't know Alexander's motives fully, and yet she trusted him. One evening, as they watched the sunset through the large glass windows of the living room, she finally asked the question that had been burning in her heart. Why? Why? Help strangers in such a dangerous situation? Alexander turned to her, and for the first time his silence was broken not by orders or instructions but by confession. He had seen too many lives shattered by fear and powerlessness. That night, seeing Sarah and Grace running through the rain, helpless and terrified, had reminded him that life's value was not in wealth or status, but in protecting the innocent when no one else could. He had saved them, not out of obligation, but out of something deeper, an understanding of loss, a desire to right the unrightable, and a quiet hope that even a single act of kindness could ripple through the world. Days turned into weeks, and Sarah began to rebuild her life under Alexander's protective guidance. She found employment with flexible hours, allowing her to care for Grace without the constant terror that had once defined their existence. The bond between the three of them deepened. Alexander remained a silent guardian in many ways, but Sarah recognized the subtle ways he had become part of their lives. He had shown her, without fanfare or expectation, that humanity could be generous, brave, and selfless. And Grace, with her laughter now filling the once empty home, seemed to understand on a child's level that some people were placed in your life not by chance, but by purpose. One night, as Sarah tucked Grace into bed, she whispered a prayer of gratitude for the mysterious man who had saved them both. She knew she would never fully understand the dangers they had narrowly escaped, but she no longer lived in fear. She had witnessed the power of courage cloaked in quiet resolve, the kind of courage that doesn't demand recognition but simply acts. And in that moment she realized that safety, love, and hope were not just abstract ideas. They were real, tangible, and sometimes delivered in the form of a stranger who walked into your life at exactly the right time. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to like, share, and comment below. Your engagement helps these stories reach more people who need a reminder of hope and humanity. Don't be shy. Share your thoughts and feelings about Sarah and Grace's journey in the weeks that followed. Sarah and Grace flourished. The nightmares of the past began to fade, replaced by laughter, learning, and a sense of belonging they had never known. Alexander's role in their lives remained a quiet, steadfast presence, a reminder that true heroism doesn't always roar. It sometimes whispers through action rather than words. And Sarah, who had once run through rain-soaked streets fearing for her life and her daughters, finally understood that miracles aren't always obvious, but they are real, often arriving in the most unexpected ways. The silent CEO who had saved them had changed their lives forever, leaving Sarah with a profound lesson. Sometimes the people who enter your life without warning are exactly the ones who were meant to protect your heart, shield your family, and restore your faith in humanity. And while she may never fully grasp the full extent of his sacrifices, she knew one thing with certainty: kindness, courage, and compassion could still exist in a world that often seemed harsh and unforgiving. Before you go, leave a comment about what act of kindness in your life changed everything for you. These stories are meant to inspire, remind us of the good, and show that even in our darkest hours, hope can arrive when we least expect it. And so, Sarah and Grace's story continues, a story of fear transformed into hope, despair transformed into love, and a life saved by a man whose silence spoke louder than words ever could. In the quiet acts of courage, the world still holds miracles, and sometimes, just sometimes, they come disguised as a sleek black car on a stormy night.